Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! In the dimming light of a Saturday's dusk, as the sun's final rays played upon dust motes in the air, an unremarkable scene unfolded in a modest apartment. A man, Oscar Morgan, slightly hidden by his dark hair, tapped a steady beat on the kitchen countertop, contemplating the ordinary days ahead. His life, at 32, had become a well-worn path, the routine of weekdays spent on accounting tasks, and weekends confined to his unassuming dwelling. A recent conversation with his sister, Rebecca, lingered in his thoughts, offering a brief reprieve from the monotony. Rebecca's voice, as he recalled it, seemed to echo in the empty room. "Leaving my red cocktail dress in your closet. Remember, I'll need it for the gala. Don't let anything happen to it, okay?" Oscar glanced toward the closet, knowing the garment bag hung there, waiting. Rebecca had stopped by while he was grabbing groceries, using her spare key to drop off the dress. They had always been close despite their different lifestyles. She, the vivacious event planner with a packed social calendar. He, the methodical accountant who preferred quiet evenings at home. The apartment felt particularly empty tonight. Oscar wandered to the closet and unzipped the garment bag, revealing a stunning crimson dress. The fabric caught the light, shimmering slightly as he ran his fingers over the material. It was soft, delicate, nothing like his stiff button-downs and practical slacks. He murmured, holding the dress against himself absently. It was just curiosity, he told himself, the way one might wonder about anything unfamiliar. Without fully acknowledging what he was doing, Oscar carried the dress to his bedroom and laid it across his bed. For several minutes, he simply stared at it, experiencing an inexplicable pull. He glanced at his reflection in the full-length mirror attached to his closet door, his gray t-shirt and faded jeans, a stark contrast to the vibrant dress on the bed.
"This is ridiculous,"
he whispered to the empty room, but his hands were already reaching for the hem of his shirt. The dress slid over his head in a whisper of fabric. Oscar adjusted it, surprised at how the material clung to his body. The hem fell just above his knees, and though the chest was loose where he lacked curves, the overall fit wasn't as incongruous as he might have expected. His masculine shoulders and frame didn't quite match the dress's intended silhouette, but something about the image reflected back at him felt strangely compelling. Oscar turned slowly, watching how the dress moved with him. The rich red color brought warmth to his complexion that he'd never noticed before. He ran his hands down his sides, feeling the unfamiliar texture against his palms.
"What are you doing?"
he asked his reflection, but there was no judgment in his voice, only wonder. He took a tentative step, then another, watching how the fabric swished around his legs. The sensation was foreign, yet pleasant, liberating in a way he couldn't articulate. Oscar found himself smiling at his reflection, then quickly looked away, a flush creeping up his neck. After a few minutes of quiet experimentation, walking, sitting, even a small tentative twirl, Oscar carefully removed the dress and hung it back in its garment bag. He returned to his evening routine, preparing a simple dinner and settling in with a book. But his thoughts kept drifting back to those brief moments and the surprising comfort he had felt. When Rebecca collected her dress the following week, Oscar said nothing about his private moment of curiosity. Life continued its predictable pattern: spreadsheets, client meetings, evening takeout. But something had shifted internally. 3 weeks later, on another quiet Saturday, Oscar found himself browsing online shopping sites, cursor hovering over women's clothing sections. Before he could talk himself out of it, he placed an order for a simple navy blue A-line dress. When the package arrived, he waited until evening to open it, hands trembling slightly as he removed the dress from its packaging. This one fit differently than Rebecca's cocktail dress, more forgiving in the shoulders, falling gracefully to mid-calf. Oscar stood before the mirror again, this time with his own purchased dress, and the reflection looking back at him sparked something that felt surprisingly like joy. Over the next few weekends, Oscar's experimentation grew more deliberate. He ordered makeup tutorials online, practicing with inexpensive cosmetics purchased during his lunch breaks. His first attempts were clumsy, eyeliner too thick, foundation too orange, but he improved with each session. He learned to contour his jawline to appear softer, to shape his eyebrows into more feminine arches, to apply mascara without blinking it onto his cheeks. By the second month, Oscar's closet contained a modest collection of dresses, a pair of low heels, and an expanding makeup kit. He discovered a preference for floral patterns and A-line silhouettes that complemented his frame. The navy dress remained a favorite, but he'd added a green sundress with small white flowers, a burgundy wrap dress, and a black skirt with a cream-colored blouse. One Saturday morning, as Oscar prepared for his weekend transformation, he paused with a makeup brush in hand. "Who am I becoming?" he whispered to his reflection. The question lingered as he completed his routine, applying foundation with now practiced strokes, defining his eyes with subtle shadow, and finishing with a rose-colored lipstick. Standing before the mirror in the green floral dress, makeup carefully applied, Oscar felt a sense of completeness he'd never experienced before. The person in the reflection wasn't just Oscar playing dress-up. This was someone else, someone who had been waiting to emerge. "Catalina," he said softly, testing the name on his lips. It felt right, elegant and feminine, nothing like Oscar with his spreadsheets and sensible shoes. "I'm Catalina." That weekend marked a turning point. Oscar began living as Catalina every weekend, from Friday evening until Sunday night. He, now she, perfected her feminine voice through careful practice, learned to walk gracefully in increasingly higher heels, and expanded her wardrobe to include accessories that completed her transformation. Catalina developed a signature style, vintage-inspired dresses in jewel tones that flattered her figure and complemented her naturally brown hair, which she had started growing longer. She found that with the right styling products, her own hair could be coaxed into soft waves that framed her face beautifully, enhancing the feminine appearance she cultivated with such care. For months, Catalina's world remained confined to the walls of Oscar's apartment. She would cook elaborate meals for herself, read books Oscar never seemed to have time for, and watch classic films that Oscar had always meant to see. She was discovering not just a new appearance, but new interests and aspects of personality that had never had space to emerge in Oscar's carefully structured life. The first venture outside came on a rainy Sunday morning in April. Catalina stood at her window, watching droplets race down the glass, dressed in her burgundy wrap dress and modest heels. A small cafe had opened 2 blocks away, and she had been eyeing it for weeks. Today, something in her whispered, "It's time." Heart pounding, Catalina applied a final touch of lipstick, grabbed an umbrella, and stepped out of the apartment before she could change her mind. The click of her heels against the hallway floor sounded impossibly loud, and she held her breath as she passed a neighbor's door, but no one emerged to question her presence. Outside, the rain created a convenient excuse to keep her head slightly down, umbrella tilted to shield her face. Each step away from the apartment building both terrified and exhilarated her. The cafe appeared ahead, its windows foggy with warmth against the cool spring rain. Catalina pushed open the door, bracing herself for stares or questions, but found only the normal bustle of a Sunday morning coffee crowd. The barista, a young woman with multiple ear piercings and blue-tipped hair, smiled with casual friendliness. "What can I get for you today?" No double takes, no questioning glances, just a simple transaction between two women on a rainy morning. "A vanilla latte, please," Catalina replied, her practiced feminine voice emerging naturally. "And one of those blueberry scones." She selected a small table by the window, alternating between watching raindrops streak the glass and observing her fellow cafe patrons. No one paid her any particular attention. She was just another woman enjoying a Sunday morning coffee, unremarkable in her normalcy. That first outing broke the dam. The following weekend, Catalina visited a bookstore, browsing the fiction section and purchasing a novel by an author Oscar had never read. The weekend after that, she walked through the farmer's market, selecting fresh flowers for her apartment and sampling local honey. With each successful venture, Catalina's confidence grew. She began to recognize regular faces at her favorite spots: the barista who remembered her latte order, the elderly gentleman who always held the door at the bookstore, the flower vendor who saved the brightest blooms for her. In these interactions, she was only and ever Catalina, her femininity unquestioned, her weekday identity unsuspected. Oscar's life continued in parallel, competent, reliable, somewhat reserved. His colleagues noticed subtle changes, a growing confidence in meetings, a willingness to speak up more often, but attributed these to professional growth rather than his evolving personal life. If they noticed his increasingly longer hair, now reaching past his collar and often tucked behind his ears, they made no comment. The dual existence continued for nearly a year. Oscar lived for the weekends when he could become Catalina, and Catalina grew increasingly frustrated with the constraints of her limited time. The inevitable collision of these worlds came from an unexpected direction. On a crisp Saturday afternoon in October, Catalina was browsing through a vintage clothing store she'd discovered recently. Dressed in her favorite burgundy wrap dress with a cream-colored cardigan, her brown hair styled in soft waves that brushed her shoulders, she was examining a teal pencil skirt when a familiar voice called out behind her.
"Rebecca."
Catalina froze, the fabric of the skirt still between her fingers. She knew that voice. Martin, one of Oscar's colleagues from the accounting firm. Slowly, she turned, her heart hammering against her ribs. Martin stood a few feet away, confusion evident on his face as he realized his mistake. "I'm sorry. I thought you were someone else. You look remarkably like my coworker's sister." Catalina's mind raced. Martin had met Rebecca several times at company events. The family resemblance between Oscar and his sister had always been strong. Same brown hair, similar facial structure. Now, transformed as Catalina, she must have triggered that recognition. "No need to apologize," she managed, her voice steady despite her panic. "I get mistaken for others sometimes." Martin nodded politely and moved away, but Catalina noticed him glancing back several times, the puzzled expression lingering. She abandoned the skirt and left the store quickly, heart still pounding as she walked briskly back to her apartment. That evening, as she removed her makeup with trembling hands, Catalina confronted the reality she'd been avoiding. The compartmentalized life she'd created was not sustainable. Oscar and Catalina could not continue to exist separately, particularly in a city where unexpected encounters were inevitable. The following Monday, Oscar sat at his desk, distracted and uneasy. Martin stopped by around lunchtime, leaning against the doorframe of Oscar's office.
Saw the strangest thing this weekend.
He commented casually.
Woman who looked remarkably like your sister Rebecca. The resemblance was uncanny, except something about her reminded me of you, too. Weird, right?
Oscar maintained his composure with effort.
Must have been a coincidence. Rebecca was out of town this weekend.
Martin nodded, but his expression remained thoughtful.
Guess everyone has a doppelganger somewhere.
The encounter catalyzed a period of deep reflection. For weeks, Oscar wrestled with questions of identity and authenticity. Was Catalina merely an escape, a character he'd created? Or was she the more genuine expression of who he truly was? The line between his two selves had begun to blur, Catalina's confidence influencing Oscar's professional demeanor, Oscar's analytical mind enhancing Catalina's approach to her expanding world. The decision crystallized gradually, rather than in a single moment of clarity. Oscar began researching gender identity, connecting with online communities, and eventually made an appointment with a therapist specializing in gender issues. The conversations were challenging but illuminating, confirming what he had begun to suspect. Catalina wasn't a weekend hobby or alternate persona. She was his authentic self, emerging despite years of conforming to expectations. The transition plan took shape methodically, in keeping with Oscar's natural approach to life changes. He, increasingly thinking of herself as she, began subtle changes at work, growing out her brown hair further, softening her wardrobe choices with more androgynous options, wearing clear nail polish that caught the light during presentations. 6 months after the encounter with Martin, Oscar scheduled a meeting with her supervisor, Hannah, a pragmatic woman in her 50s who had always valued Oscar's contributions to the firm.
I appreciate you making time for this conversation.
Oscar began, seated across from Hannah's desk, wearing dress slacks and a soft blue button-down that represented the current midpoint of her evolving style. I wanted to discuss something personal that will have some professional implications. Hannah set aside the file she'd been reviewing, giving Oscar her full attention.
I'm listening. I'm transgender,
Oscar said, the words both terrifying and liberating to speak aloud in her workplace.
I've been living as a woman named Catalina, outside of work for over a year now, and I've begun the process of transitioning. I wanted to discuss how we might handle this at the office.
Hannah's expression remained neutral, processing the information with the same thoughtfulness she applied to complex financial matters. Thank you for sharing this with me, Oscar. Or would you prefer I call you Catalina now? Catalina, yes, thank you. Catalina, then. The firm has a non-discrimination policy that certainly covers gender identity. Have you thought about how you'd like to approach this with the team? The conversation continued with practical considerations. Timing for an office-wide announcement, updates to email signatures and nameplate, bathroom usage policies. Hannah's matter-of-fact acceptance set the tone for what followed. The transition at work unfolded more smoothly than Catalina had dared hope. An official email went out to staff, briefly explaining that Oscar would now be known as Catalina and using feminine pronouns. There were a few awkward moments and occasional pronoun slips, but these decreased with time. Martin, after his initial surprise, became one of her strongest allies, correcting others when they misgendered her and making a point of including her in team lunches. Catalina's professional wardrobe evolved to include the pencil skirts and blouses she had admired as Oscar, but never permitted herself to consider. Her confidence in client meetings grew as the discord between her internal identity and external presentation diminished. The firm's clients adjusted with minimal disruption, most concerned primarily with her continued expertise in handling their accounts.
The personal aspects of transition brought both challenges and profound joys. Telling Rebecca had been among the hardest conversations, but after initial shock, her sister had embraced her with tears and laughter. "So, that's what happened to my red cocktail dress," Rebecca had said, wiping away tears. "It looked better on you anyway." Hormone therapy gradually softened Catalina's features and redistributed her body's contours. She documented the changes with weekly photos, marveling at the subtle shifts that aligned her physical form more closely with her internal sense of self. Her brown hair, now falling past her shoulders in natural waves, became one of her favorite features, a visible symbol of her journey and commitment to living authentically. The apartment transformed along with its occupant. Oscar's minimalist decor gave way to Catalina's more expressive aesthetic: botanical prints on the walls, colorful throw pillows on the sofa, fresh flowers on the dining table. Even the bookshelves evolved, Oscar's finance texts and historical biographies now sharing space with the novels and poetry collections Catalina discovered on her weekend outings. Those weekend explorations expanded into weekday life. The cafe where Catalina had nervously ordered her first public latte became her regular morning stop. The barista, Emma, now a friend, greeted her by name and often had her order started before she reached the counter. "The usual, Catalina?" Emma asked one morning, already reaching for the vanilla syrup. "Please, and maybe one of those almond croissants today. I'm celebrating." Emma raised an eyebrow as she worked the espresso machine. "What's the occasion?" "1 year since my first time here. You probably don't remember, but it was raining and I was terrified." Emma laughed, sliding the latte across the counter. "I remember. You kept looking around like you expected someone to challenge your right to be here. Look at you now." Catalina accepted the compliment with a smile, no longer surprised by how people remembered her. As Oscar, she had moved through the world largely unnoticed, but Catalina connected with others in a way that left impressions. The difference wasn't just in her appearance, but in her openness to engagement, her willingness to be seen. The bookstore became another regular haunt, with Catalina joining a monthly book club that met in the shop's back room. Her analytical mind, honed through years of accounting work, brought unique perspectives to literary discussions, while the creative aspects of fiction that she'd begun to explore enriched her thinking in unexpected ways. "Your interpretation of the protagonist's motivations is fascinating," commented Diana, the silver-haired retired professor who led the book club. "You have a way of seeing both the emotional and practical dimensions of their choices." Catalina recognized this as a product of her distinctive life experience, the blend of Oscar's logical approach with her own emotional intelligence. Rather than compartmentalizing these aspects of herself as she once had her gender expression, she increasingly integrated them into a more complete identity. The transition wasn't without difficulties. Some friends from Oscar's life drifted away, uncomfortable with the change. Her parents struggled, her father particularly finding it difficult to use her new name. Family gatherings became complicated negotiations of identity and acceptance. But for each relationship lost or strained, Catalina discovered new connections that appreciated her authentic self. 2 years after that first tentative venture in Rebecca's red dress, Catalina stood in her apartment preparing for a different kind of milestone. The burgundy wrap dress, now tailored to better fit her hormone-changed body, hung ready on the closet door. On her dresser lay an invitation to the accounting firm's annual charity gala, the same event for which Rebecca had reclaimed her dress years earlier. This would be Catalina's first formal work event since completing her legal name change and officially updating all her identification documents. The final severance of Oscar's legal existence, making Catalina not just a lived reality, but a documented one. As she applied her makeup, skills now refined through daily practice, Catalina reflected on the journey. The nervous man who had slipped into his sister's dress out of curiosity seemed both intimately familiar and distantly remembered, like a character in a story she had read long ago rather than lived. The doorbell interrupted her thoughts. Rebecca had arrived to help with final preparations for the evening. "Look at you," her sister said, entering the bedroom with a garment bag draped over one arm. "That color is still perfect on you." Catalina smiled, applying a final touch of mascara. "It's always been my favorite. Something about that first day in your red dress made burgundy feel like my color." "Well, I brought something to complement it." Rebecca unzipped the garment bag, revealing a shimmering gold shawl. "Early birthday present. It'll look stunning with the dress." The sisters spent the next hour in comfortable companionship, Rebecca helping to style Catalina's brown hair into an elegant updo that showcased her earrings, small rubies that matched her dress, another gift from Rebecca to mark the completion of her legal transition. "Are you nervous about tonight?" Rebecca asked, securing a final pin in Catalina's hair. "A little," Catalina admitted. "Most of these people have known me through the entire transition process, but some of the partners are flying in from other offices, and clients will be there." "You'll amaze them," Rebecca assured her, "not just with how beautiful you look, but with how completely yourself you are now. It shows in everything. The way you move, how you speak, that confidence that used to only appear in flashes." Catalina studied her reflection. The burgundy dress hugged her figure in all the right places, the gold shawl adding a touch of glamour. Her makeup enhanced, rather than masked, her features, emphasizing the warm brown of her eyes and the curve of her lips. The woman looking back at her from the mirror was unquestionably Catalina, with no trace of Oscar's uncertainty. "I never imagined this," she said softly. "That day with your red dress, I thought it was just curiosity. A strange little experiment. I didn't know I was finding myself." Rebecca squeezed her shoulder. "Sometimes the most important discoveries start with the smallest acts of courage." The gala exceeded Catalina's expectations. Her colleagues complimented her appearance with genuine admiration. The visiting partners, after brief introductions, engaged her in discussions about her accounts and recent market analyses, clearly valuing her professional insights. Even clients who had known her as Oscar adapted smoothly, more concerned with her investment recommendations than her gender presentation. Martin approached during the dessert course, champagne flute in hand. "Remember when I mistook you for Rebecca in that vintage shop? Something about you seemed so familiar, but I couldn't place it." Catalina laughed. "That was a terrifying moment. I was sure you'd recognize me." "I almost did, but it seemed so improbable." He shook his head. "Looking at you now, though, it all makes sense. You were always Catalina, weren't you? Even when you were introducing yourself as Oscar." The observation struck her with its accuracy. "I think so, yes. I just didn't have the language for it yet, or the courage to acknowledge it." "Well, the firm's better for having Catalina instead of Oscar. You do better work when you're not expending all that energy hiding." As the evening progressed, Catalina found herself at the center of a lively discussion with colleagues and clients, her natural analytical abilities enhanced by the confidence that came with living authentically. The woman who had once been afraid to order coffee in public now commanded attention in a room full of financial professionals, her burgundy dress and elegant updo merely external expressions of her internal certainty. Later that night, as Catalina prepared for bed, removing the pins from her hair and letting the brown waves fall around her shoulders,
She caught sight of her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The makeup was gone, the dress exchanged for comfortable pajamas, but Catalina remained. In the soft curve of her cheek, the thoughtful expression in her eyes, the very essence of who she had become. On her dresser lay a small red ornament, a piece of fabric from Rebecca's original cocktail dress, framed as a gift on the first anniversary of Catalina's public transition. Beside it stood a photograph taken at the gala, Catalina radiant in burgundy and gold, surrounded by colleagues who now knew her only as herself. The weekend hobby that had begun with a borrowed dress had become a complete life, not perfect, not without challenges, but wholly authentic. Catalina Morgan, no longer confined to Saturday afternoons and Sunday mornings, now lived each day in the full expression of her true self, the click of her heels against hardwood floors, a constant reminder of the journey that had begun with one curious moment and a whisper of red fabric.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!